So where do things with the U.S. go from here, and what does it mean politically? Let's bring back our front bench, Marco Mendicino, James Moore, and Nathan Cullen. James, I'll start this round with you. What is your, I guess, perception of how things unfolded this week with the D.C. trip and in the politics of the return?
Well, I mean, this is a 4-year management exercise with the President of the United States, and it's complicated. I mean, clearly the Prime Minister had a good moment with the President in the Oval Office. You know, the very next day, Minister Lutnick came out and poured cold water over that on the auto sector side. So we'll see in the fullness of time. But the idea that the President and the Prime Minister are going to sign some kind of an agreement and a pact that has the full weight of both governments behind it and will give us certainty for the next 3.5 years or 1,000+ days of what's left in the Trump presidency, I think, frankly, is an impossibility. The best thing we can hope for is to have some forward progress, mending offenses between the relationship of the Prime Minister and the President in such a way that will mitigate some of the risks that are associated with our economy. But it's going to be a very long, drawn-out presidency that is going to be full of risks for the Canada-U.S. relationship. I think overall, we've had a good week. Nothing will ever be permanent with this president, who seems to be on a whim, who on a whim can frankly set everything back, with and implode any progress that's been made. But so far, I think this has been, a good week. But the day is still young.
What do you think the objective, Marco, was going into this? And ultimately, do you think the government feels the pressure of the kind of debate that we played, which is a lot of pressure from opposition parties? We played Mr. Poilievre. Mr. Blanchet has been nonstop on this as well, that there has to be something tangible to show. Not, as James mentioned, not like an overarching deal that we can all say, oh, yeah, this will be here for the next 3 years, but even something like sectoral relief to some degree.
I think the objective was to move the ball down the field, and I think that the Prime Minister advanced that objective, and James is quite right. It was a high watermark for the President of the United States, Donald Trump, to say that we've got a world-class leader in Mark Carney, that we've got a very, very solid, strong Prime Minister, that, frankly, he's a tough negotiator. And what does that mean? He's not going to put pen to paper just for any deal. It means that he's going to stand his ground and make sure that we get the best possible deal for Canada. And what does that mean? It means focusing not only on today's economy, but the future. It means, as Minister Joly said, you referred to it off the top, that we protect workers, providing them with loans and grants, those sectors that are most affected in the auto sector, which has been the backbone of the economy here in central Canada, providing supports for the softwood lumber sector, which is an important, very significant part of the economy in both of the coasts, providing supports for the workers themselves. I mean, it's crucial that we do that, but it's also crucial that we build one Canadian economy. We've talked about that, using the power to procure, to drive growth. I mean, those supply chains that Minister Joly were referring to typically see us export steel to the United States, and certainly we hope to continue doing that. But in the meantime, let's get shipbuilders in Canada to put some of those orders into Northern Ontario, to Algoma, to Stelco, to others. And that's part of what is happening. Let's stand up and get results when it comes to major projects so we can see shovels in the ground. Let's stand up and get results when it comes to creating a new defense procurement sector. And if we do that and we rely on the natural resources and the skills of our workers, then we will see that one Canadian economy, which is the best way to mitigate the uncertainty and the turmoil that we're having to navigate through.
What Marco says kind of reminds me, Nathan, of something that kind of stood out to me over the course of this week, which is there's two different messages that the government is trying to deliver simultaneously. One comes from what you just heard from Minister Joly, which is all about kind of building out the economy domestically and building out things so that we focus away from the United States. And Marco cited many of the examples. But the other came during the White House visit, where you heard on a number of occasions the Prime Minister kind of pitch the idea that actually we would become more integrated as far as investment goes, or as far as defense and security goes, and energy security was another thing he talked more about, like further integration, further interdependence. We can work together in those areas. I understand the logic behind both of those things, but from a communications perspective, is it difficult to square that circle?
Well, yes, it's the short answer, because the Prime Minister is managing at least several things at once. One is Canadians' expectations, I think the Liberals, maybe mistakenly or more hopefully, raised the idea that this trip would lead to the relief of some of those tariffs. As that started to become clear that wasn't going to happen, then we moved to the managing of the president himself. As James has well said, this is a very challenging person to deal with for a whole variety of reasons, some psychological as much as economic. But the point of the exercise for Mr. Carney seems to be get along with the president, which he's doing. They seem to like each other, which is a big step up. Trump still can't help but talk about Trudeau, who's no longer here, but he really didn't like him much. The second, though, is to get results for Canadians. All those people going to work in all of these industries that are being impacted by Trump's tariffs, when the pink slips start coming, and they have in some places, they're going to be looking to their government to say, what are you doing about it? You're going down, you're being nice. We took all of our tariffs off. We've given up a bunch of concessions. At some point, he's going to need to get something out. Raising Keystone was an interesting move, right? Is this something that the president wants? As we just spent the first half of our show talking about decoupling ourselves from the U.S., right. There's the prime minister going into the White House, into the Oval Office to say, hey, you want another pipeline? It's a bit betwixt and between. I don't know if you can sustain it, to be honest, because of course, we're going to be connected to the U.S. economy. Of course, it's going to be managed and difficult over the next few years. And of course, we need to get more integrated with the rest of the world and better within provinces. That's a lot of messages to run at once, which is difficult for a government to do because people want a little consistency, which is not an unreasonable expectation.
I've got just a couple of minutes left, but I hope I can do one quick other round. James, your thoughts on that, squaring that circle?
Well, the Keystone one was an interesting thing to raise, sort of throwing that bait in front of the lion, but 100 yards down the road in front of the lion of not only the United States, but also of Alberta to sort of keep them focused on something different, because I'm not convinced that Prime Minister Carney and the government are prepared to do the political risk-taking that's necessary in order to get a pipeline to the west coast of British Columbia. Nathan makes an important point, and you mentioned sectoral supports in your open to Marco a second ago, Vashi, which is this. There's going to be a time for choosing for this government, and there's a high risk associated with it. The sectoral supports that you mentioned, Vashi, whether it's to the lumber sector, steel and aluminum sector, to the auto sector, or even, you think about the Online Streaming Act and the creative communities and all that, who are very anxious about what protections may reside in the CUSMA agreement going forward with the United States. If the government does start doling out supports on a sectoral basis to different folks who are impacted by President Trump's actions on either the tariff side or the CUSMA side, it won't take very long for the ambassador in Ottawa, the American ambassador in Ottawa, or for others in sectors in the United States to start saying, hey, look, the Canadians are at it again. They're not acting in good conscience. And so you get this cat and mouse game about, Donald Trump puts in tariffs, we respond, we would lower our tariffs, but we give sectoral support either to workers or to industries. Then Donald Trump says, aha, see, they weren't acting in good faith. And around we go, and around we go. So those sectors who may be getting support in the coming federal budget, they need to start thinking about their communications plan and what the government's plan is going to be, because those sectoral supports that a lot of people want to see happen in order to mitigate the impact of the Donald Trump tariffs and his approach to things, those items may very well be used to trigger Donald Trump for more tariff action or more trade action in the next 3+ years of the Trump presidency. So we've got to be very careful about how we do this and how it's seen by the administration.
Just got 30 seconds left. Marco, last word to you.
Well, I would say that securing the best possible deal in a completely ruptured and newly calibrated world when it comes to trade is completely consistent with the one Canadian economy vision of the Prime Minister. And it does not mean closing the door, but rather exploiting all of the potential opportunities that exist when it comes to trading with our #1 partner in the United States, including in energy. Meanwhile, we do need to be focused on doing all the things that I've mentioned. So getting major projects, shovels in the ground, making sure that we reduce internal trade so that we are doing east to west for Canadians, and also providing supports to workers. And that has to be at the top of our mind. At the end of the day, we talk about numbers in the aggregate. We throw out these numbers, but frankly, it is the workers who are feeling it right now, and that's why those supports are crucial. So if we do that, those two messages are, I think, completely consistent, and that is the focus of the government.
All right, I got to leave it there. Thank you very much, all three of you. I appreciate making time for the discussion. Nathan Cullen, James Moore, and Marco Mendicino, our front bench.